Good evening, everyone. We can start this backstage dedicated to the 33. It is another anniversary of this year. This year we have many anniversaries. We have seen the Autosci Competizione, now the 33, the Giulia, GT, the Auto Delta in 2 weeks, and the birth of the Quadrifoglio with its 100 years anniversary. But the Alfa 33 is a strange backstage because it's the first time that we talk about it at a museum and also in general, at least with this wide participation that shows how this car has now the right to become a collectible car. But before starting with our conference, I want you to watch this video that was created when the 33 was born. So the quality of the video, of course, is not the best, but the magnetic tapes are getting ruined and we're trying to restore them, so next time it will be better. But let's talk about our 33, which celebrates its 40th anniversary. The 33, as all cars, had a series of issues, of projects that gave way to the final one. And I would like to start from the style, which was communicated through the idea of the broken line of 2 volumes and a half, and the entire communication would revolve around this, and this is also the center of our flash mob, and this originates from the ancestor of the 33, so the car which gave it its birth, so the Alfa Sud, and the 2 cars are very connected. On all the drafts, the documents correlated to the style, it's always called Alfa Sud 2. And the first prototypes, at least the design and style one, come from bodies of the Alfa Sud modified with the new introductions. And in particular, the rear part, which is elongated compared to the Alfa Sud. In this test done at the Pininfarina wind tunnel, you can see how the tests were made with the bodies of the Alfa Sud modified. And at the time, Ola Crestoni, the head of the design department, during the presentation explains the sense of this line, which was not only a graphic line, but was the willingness to give something more compared to the compact car with the truncated back, the camtail, without invading the 3-volume sedan market. So the 2 volumes and a half look the best solution, able to get both advantages, positioning the 33 a little bit higher than the Alfa Sud. In reality, the final line of the 33 was not drawn immediately. As a matter of fact, the first maquette, which was communicated and that was used up to 83, at the moment of the presentation, has shapes which are very distant from the final 33 that we can see today under our eyes. It is more rounded. It has not yet this configuration of these 2 volumes and a half, and recalls very vaguely the Alfa Sud. This is a model which is used very often during the presentation of the 33. But in reality, this project was a project that was not neglected from the beginning, but was considered till the final decision, so the final project. And we can see this in the one-to-one models in these pictures, where both projects were considered. One is more linked to the model that we saw before, with more rounded line, especially at the rear, even though in the front you can really see the similarity with the Alfa Sud, and the second one starts to resemble very closely to the actual 33. So once the study was completed, some peculiarities that this style model had, like the rear lamps and also the inside, which had a very different cutting-edge geometric layout, were then abandoned till we got to the final definition, which especially on the inside is very innovative. The Crestoni dashboard of the first series was very innovative, with a series of islands, geometric islands on the central tunnel. So the design of the interior was very peculiar, even though it was later abandoned. But quickly, the day of the presentation came, well, the days of the presentation, because the presentations in reality were 2. One was a big celebration in Monte Carlo with a show. So, following the line of what Alfa Romeo was doing since the 50s, so very spectacular presentations, able to attract the attention of newspapers and the wide audience, there was this new Monte Carlo presentation with the Kessler sisters with 400 guests and a series of evenings which left very few traces on the press. So guests participated, but apart from a few lines on the house organs of Alfa Romeo, especially Alfa Notizia, and very few people talking about it, there are no records about this presentation of Monte Carlo. There is a picture in the archive upstairs, but there are no other articles which appeared. And officially, the presentation of the 33 would then be more mediatized in the second event held near Venice the following day, near Jesolo also, where the press presentation was made. So there would no longer be 4 cars on the stage with special effects, but 40 test cars, and the journalists could drive them, the 1,500 and the 1,300 especially. And the press covered widely this, both on paper and on TV, this event. So, as we will see soon, they would refuse the information given also by Alfa Romeo, and in part, they launched critiques of the car. But to understand what the 33 represented, we should analyze the market of the early 80s. So Alfa Romeo, first of all, was not in its golden era. It was a period that, as the magazines underline, everybody waited for the relaunch of Alfa Romeo, so the outcome of a crisis. And the market at that time was segmented, but the segment of medium compact cars, the C segment of today, was booming with about 30% of volumes, well, 28% in Europe, with 500,000 cars sold per year only in Italy from that segment. And so looked as the perfect way to go along, but Alfa Romeo had to rethink itself to offer a range satisfying what Innocenti describes as 3 columns of the new Alfa. The first column had to be improving the construction quality. We all know what was done and said about Alfa Sud, what happened. We also know that the market of cars in general in those years changed, and the quality had to do leap forwards, not only in terms of construction, but also the perceived quality. So the internal part, the options, that was becoming more aggressive from abroad. The second pillar was an industrial pillar. We had to saturate the productive capacity, finding a way to make the plants more active, improving production, reorganizing them. So bringing the company to be efficient. And the third pillar was rethinking the range, that no longer had to be single model with many versions, as it was historically for Alfa Romeo in the post-war period. So we imagine the Giulia, which was one model with a series of differentiations for a Berlina, the sedan, the Spider, the Coupe, but they were all from the Giulia family. The same was for the Alfetta and for the Alfa Sud somehow. But the competitors abroad were changing in the market, so they were offering specialized models, one model for each segment, one model for each market niche, and not only one version. So the Alfa range would have to be more articulated on different models, and in order to do that, we had to pay attention not to overlap to other offers. That's the reason why we think that the Pomigliano plant and the area of Naples, so the Arna birth was not clear yet, had to produce 180,000 cars per year. So among the new Alfa Sud, so the Alfa 33, which had to be presented, and the Arna from the same period. In order to do that, the 33 had to shift towards the upper part of the segment to be more powerful, to be more refined, in order to be closer to the Alfa Nord range. So a real sedan, a version with 3 volumes, was also taken into consideration in those years, but especially it had to open a window of market for the basis of the range, which was represented by the Arna. The goal of 180,000 cars was never reached because the Arna was not there. Because if we consider the 33, the Sportwagon, the Giardinetta, the sedan becomes the second most sold car after Alfa Sud in the history of Alfa Romeo. But then things went differently, at least considering the idea of articulating the range and having every car to be successful, because the other pillars of the 33 were satisfied. So the 33, though it derives from the Alfa Sud, has a perceived and constructive quality which is definitely better, and we will see it shortly, but also the productive system is redesigned. But the 33, not only during the launch, but during its entire and long career, is also linked to a series of innovations, technical innovations, market innovations, that are linked to the 33 more than to other cars. The first innovation, if we want, is the Giardinetta. We know that the Giardinetta, well, a mixed version of the Giulietta was already existing. So a Giardinetta version called in different ways, and it was done for Giulia. But we are talking about volumes and market positionings of niches, and also the attempt done with the Alfa Sud then would give way to a very limited number of cars produced. But the 33 was a deep rethinking of the Giardinetta, a car which no longer had to be only functional, but caters to a different audience, but is not professional, that doesn't need to transport, but uses the versatility of a Giardinetta for other activities, like sports activities, to walk the dog, to go skiing, to carry a bike. And these are examples that the Alfa Romeo does when communicating the Giardinetta. And shortly, the Giardinetta version, nicknamed Sportwagon, later on will become one of the backbones of the range of the 33, by changing not only the positioning of the concept of Giardinetta on the market, but also shifting upwards the positioning of the 33 itself, that in the Giardinetta version, no longer so the functional versions, but the more refined and luxurious versions. And the Giardinetta, as we will see, would accompany the history of the 33 during its entire production. The second innovation is four-wheel drive. Four-wheel drive had already been considered for the Alfa Sud, but it's with the 33 that it enters into production and is developed. So from a mechanical to electromagnetical four-wheel drive, it evolved up to a viscous joint. So the idea of four-wheel drive changed. In the first presentation of the 4x4 33, the Alfa still talked about mud or snow, etc. So to get out of trouble in case of, but immediately after the communication changed, and they started to talk about the four-wheel drive as the tool that allows you to live different experiences, to enjoy the mountains, to enjoy hunting. At the time, you could still say that, and a series of activities having to do with leisure time. And that's not a chance that Giardinetta and four-wheel drive were communicated together, because the versatility of one and the safety of the other conveyed the concept of spare time in a very wide meaning. And also the giardinetta in an urban situation was excellent. The next step would be to transform the four-wheel drive in a sports version. The years went by, and now the supercars were looking at the four-wheel drive in order to face higher powers and needs of having a safer driving style. So the four-wheel drive is also applied to a sports Alfa Romeo, and at the beginning of the 90s, all the models of Alfa Romeo would be four-wheel drive, so 164 Q4, 155, and so on. And then we have one last innovation that debuted a little bit late on the 33 compared to the competitors, which is the 4 valves per cylinder, so which debuted on the 1700. And again, in this case, we talk about the innovation which surfaced on what was the entry level of Alfa Romeo in those years, because Arna was now neglected. This was the car that was selling most, which was the most innovative in that period, and it saw the light, and later on it expanded to the entire range because they had to keep up with the times. And this is what anyone can understand about the 33 by reading the press reviews, the leaflets, the guides, and studying the project. But we then all know that there's a part that cannot be read and is hidden, so we have to ask to people who were there and maybe can tell I said something wrong. So I have now the pleasure to invite here with me the guest of today. Amedeo Felisa needs no presentation, but I want to say that he's a person who was the head of the project of 33 here and is the father of this object that is so successful today. And then Pasquale Oliveri, who is former director of the museum, but he also had a part in the production of the 33, Lino Bondesani, again, who participated in the design of the 33, especially the part of quality improvement. Welcome. And then, even though he didn't work on it at the time, Leonardo Olivari is an expert of the model. He also he wrote a book on the 33 recently. And I will ask him to tell a different story of the 33. So how the range differentiated, trying to offer several models, but another innovation, so to speak, that the 33 brought about is the birth of the special series, and in general of a constant detailed update of the range, originating a very high number of versions, subversions, updates, and special series. So something that it can be also confusing, and Leonardo will help us clarify things. So it's difficult to ask questions, so I'm asking the father of the project, how was the birth of the 33? Well, I recall the 33 in its second part of life, because I started working in Alfa Romeo in 1972, and then at the end of the 70s I left, and I came back when Fiat bought Alfa Romeo and asked me to come back and be the head of the project of the 33, which was the second series of the car. So I remember quite well that stage of the birth of the car. And then with the arrival of Fiat, the organization changed by team, so that I was the manager of the development of this car. And at the time, I also met these people who were pressuring me every day. So this is the story. What we then lent him to Ferrari. He's the one who was head of production of Ferrari over the last few years, well, from 1990 to a few years ago. So we lent him and now he came back home. But, well, they could no longer stand with me. So we talked about research of quality, and it was a process with different steps, right? Yes, with the 33, we started following the evolution, not from the project to industrialization immediately, but with the prototypes of all the components before starting the final construction phase. So this allowed us to reduce the problems and issues of quality, and especially to have the technical times to make modifications if issues appeared. So this allowed later on to start production with less problems compared to the previous versions. So we followed it during its entire development in the Pomigliano plant for a few months, and it was a beautiful experience. What Bondesani talks about was the start of everything here in Arese. Something changed in terms of way of working on the chassis. Alfa Romeo was always the mechanical part, and from a certain point onwards, they understood that the body and chassis were very important to attract the customers. What we did with Mondesani was creating in Arese a department where prototypes were assembled and disassembled to check whether they needed modifications or they were correct. So it was the first moment when Alfa Romeo went from designing and drawing the chassis to planning it seriously. So at the time, Alfa Romeo was taking care of the style, but then the bodywork and chassis changed a little bit. So at the time, the definition of the sector dealing with these were responsible of checking that the drawings were correct to realize. So they created prototypes, models, they were assembling it in order to check that the quality of the piece was correct. So at the time, it was a huge step forward. And this culture that Mr. Felice is talking about was translated also in Fiat, because it didn't exist. There's a preventive check and verification. So the designer designed, the producer produced, but the physical checks and verifications were not done like this. But in Arete, these were developed. Arese, as always, was very innovative, both in terms of organization and in development. Of course, the body of the car was considered an accessory, but an accessory with big performances. So it was the wind also that drew the lines, but for the designers, that was a secondary part. But as he said, we exported it, and the first car, well, at the time I was a director of the experimentation center. Well, we use also carbon fiber because it was the only one giving us the correct sizes to simulate what would have been the final metal sheets. Once the car was finished, I remember that we injected it with foams to make it more stiff. We started it, and now it's kept in Turing as a working prototype, even though it had to be only static, but it was a working prototype. So Arese also taught this to the world of automobile. So Alfa Romeo is everything. Well, but that is one of the many chapters that are presented over time. So the presentation of Venice of Alpha 33 was something that the journalists, especially the foreign ones, defined monumental, because more than 20 people were called to speak, everyone said its own opinion, and the car was compared to the space shuttle. That's why there's a famous picture of the 33 in front of the space shuttle. In many cases, this was, as is often the case, transcribed from the press release. But some journalists said, okay, the 33 is a nice car, the driving is brilliant, the quality is higher than the Alpha Sud, but comparing an evolution of the Alpha Sud to the space shuttle, maybe it's too much. But having said so, after a huge pile of press releases of the presentation, there are also some pages dedicated to prototypes that in that sea of information are hard and difficult to find, and they talk about molds, about low temperature melting metals to create prototypes in a short time. So we know that the 33 was a big step forward in terms of quality, and much part derives also from this capacity of study. Not only, there was also a problem of timings. So the prototypes had to be very fast, because we had to respect all the timing and the agenda set by the company. So many new materials were invented, many types of new technologies that were applied, as Pasquale said before, and little by little also Fiat started to use them. Yes, today you hear about rapid prototyping, it is very common, but in 1995 we were the first one to create these pieces with printers, 3D printers actually, and we could create a complete dashboard from the drawing. You could have the physical piece. So it was an evolution even bigger than the computer, because the designer designed through a software. We transferred the drawing and the machine created in a few hours the piece. So we were working on 3 shifts. So having a dashboard immediately available in your hands and assembling it and understanding whether it was feasible or not to produce it, well, it was something incredible. We were the first with Mercedes. BMW was starting to do that. Mercedes was already beyond, because they had a very high potential in the micro fusion, which could just do something smaller. I did a head for Cagiva through mathematics. Then we did the support of an engine in 1 month instead of 4, always having these mathematics, bringing it into a physical part. So we went to Singerfingen, and then in a month creating a support for an engine was incredible, but it was perfect, as if it were milled. It was perfectly available, and we could assemble it, and now this use is very, very widespread. So the 33 was innovative on this, and also for the protection of the metal sheets from corrosion, both in the design stage and productive stage, is also famous. The cataphoresis picture is on every leaflet. So what was happening? Well, Alfa Romeo at the time was divided in 2, Alfa Nord and Alfa Sud. So I was a man from Alpha Nord. There was not much communication. Well, the design linked us as some technology expert. We had a problem of quality because the 33 was not even helpful. We had the Alfetta, with the problem of the windshields and windows. So Alpha Sud ruined our image internationally. I received a task from the president of the time, Cortesi. I remember I told him I wanted to go to the Autodelta because I liked races. I entered in 76 between the two world championships, and he said, okay, but in the meanwhile, you race in the factory. So, but I had to thank him because it was important to have engineers not only in the design process, but also in the factory, bringing methods, not competencies. But there were no engineers at the time in the factories, especially in Turin. So we worked a lot on the quality using the experience of Nissan. In '84, I went to Nissan and I saw that there were no plants better than ours. On the opposite, their plant was very short, maybe ideal for Japanese. It was dark, and they had machinery which was very basic, and the quality was not enough. And there were men who gave incredible contribution, because when I asked them, can you tell me the absenteeism rate, and they didn't answer me, and I said, why they don't want to do that? Because they didn't. There was no absenteeism. So I asked them, how many strikes do you have? And they said, not a single one. I said, how is it possible? Because those who went on strike had a red stripe on the arm, because it meant, okay, they were working, but they were on strike at the moment. I said, how can you work with this? But we understood that man was a fundamental element in the process. So we were getting out of the very hard period of the Brigate Rosse, you know, the terrorist attacks. But we worked with BMW and we exchanged cycles and processes. You talk about cataphoresis, and we were the first to have high thickness cataphoresis. So we imported it from PPG, from the American PPG. So BMW knew that we had this pilot tank, because Alfa was always innovative. So they asked us if they could come and paint their Series 3. And we welcomed them because we had no ideological barriers. It was an incredible company where anyone could express themselves. There were no boundaries. You could also do very bad things. Mr. Moroni also threatened me to go to the foundry once, but you were free to make mistakes. So we said, okay, you can come to the BMW. Well, you can come, you from BMW, and we send them Giuliettas. So we mutually understood to better protect the cars, the BMW, using our technology, and we imported machinery and products from the BMW. So together, from the experience of Nissan and BMW, we made a leap on the 75, which brought us to an incredible level. Well, unfortunately, the steel industry in Italy is less than in the German, for example. It's less refined than in the German market, but it was the best we could have. And we are in a period where Fiat then arrived. We had to change mindset. And they sent a lot of people. We had 2 levels of workers. They had 5 or 6 levels of workers. So they were very specialized. We instead dealt with quality and all a series of other tasks, but under our responsibility. So they gave us money. They told us you have to work less. So well, we were happy that Fiat came, but it was a period of evolutions. I think that's an important thing. If we go a little bit back in time, was the Arna project, which was a disaster. You could not do worse. But there was a very long period when programming experts of Arese went to Japan to get their experience, and that was important not only on the mechanical part but also from the body of a car, because metal sheets are an important content. It looks easy, but it's not. And at the time, the Japanese were the masters in managing metal sheets for body works. So they stayed there 1 year, 1 year and a half. They learned so much in terms of competencies. And then the car was bad, but the competence and the skills were gathered. A few months ago, we did a backstage on the Arna, which was a huge success, because backstages are helpful to also tell what is untold, and there was a lot of untold. In that case, we interviewed some representatives from Nissan who were very sad because they had goals that were never reached, and also personally they were very sad from a cultural point of view, but in the end they were so happy. They used the Arna as a Trojan horse to penetrate the Italian and European market and learn the basics of this market, to then start another market that we know very well today, the market of Japanese brands. So at least something positive was done. Yet again, we were innovative because we did the first Japanese transplant in Europe. And of course, there was a specific brand which was angry at us for this. So the product was not elegant. I'm not saying it was, well, to me, the Arna project was useful for the skills, for the technological competencies, but from the market industrial point of view, it was a dead project. It was a bad project. Like, yes, sending in the ships these body works was a disaster. But there was not many competent people at the time, so they just copied a project, thinking, okay, I associate myself to someone who's good and I become good, but it's not that easy. But we didn't say why it is called 33, and that is serious. And sometimes we take for granted the most important things. But I want to tell you an episode, because probably there's things that you say, some say an anecdote, others say another one, and Alfa Romeo experts are curious. So Kitty gave this 33 to the plant. It's called 33 because it dates back to the victories. So he gave a 33 with the colors of electronic. It was 77, the last World Championship with the ASC. So 33, not the TT, but the other version. So Pomigliano had this 33. Every time I went to Pomigliano for other reasons, I kneeled down this card thinking about Kitty, and the money was then. I left, and in 94, 95, I went to Pomigliano. I didn't find the 33, and I said, "Where is the 33 gone?" And they said, "We don't know. It's been brought to the north. We don't know." So okay, I went to the north. I asked Mimo Magro from the museum, and he said, "I don't know where it went. We were looking for it, but we're not finding it anymore." I said, "How come? Someone stole it." And as a matter of fact, the 33 arrived at the north, but it was here, close to here, I'm not telling you where, but there was a director who had it transported to the north. So Mimo was looking for it, but no one could find it. So I took one of my men and I said, okay, let's find this car in a 100 kilometers radius from Arese. In the end, we found it. We said, okay, we pay a rent, and these men agreed, and we brought it home. And it's the one that you have here. It's number 2. So Kitty had made it up as a Fernettonic SG, but it was a TT because we polished it, we cleaned it, we disassembled it, and we take the seats away. In the seats we found a P and a B, and said, what does it mean? And it meant Pescarolo and Bell. So that was number 2, TT number 2, and we rebuilt it. So the car of Pomigliano came back to Arese. It's here in the museum. It's in number 2, and it's a small anecdote. Did you know it? Oh, you knew it, but probably many of you didn't know. So now we have this car which is working. We brought to Goodwood with Marzario, X and Pescarolo Bell in those years. It was something amazing for Alfa Romeo. So we call it 33 as a tribute to the 33 prototypes. So there was also a leaflet in the presentation with the pictures of the 33. But you have it for sure. So we are both from Genoa, so we understand each other. The 33 suffered, I would call, a series of photo shoots that compared it to many things, from the space shuttle to other things. But sometimes it was considered the last resort of safety, because that also meant re-enliven the entire brand. Yes, of course. And then we united, so it was no longer Alfa Sud and Alfa Nord. But all of these projects, the project of Cressoni, our great designer, we had a strong success with the 174, both commercial and qualitative, because it could be compared to the German ones. Well, the Germans are always my benchmark. Anyway, at this point, it was clear that they didn't fire me, they promoted me. So they told me, since you had good results for the 164, now you can go to Pomigliano for the new 33, with the goal of doing the 155. So I remember that I told my director, well, 155 is not an Alfa Romeo. And he told me, well, it is just my opinion, or you can go out of that door. I went to Pomigliano. In Pomigliano, I found the 33. And it was really, really important. Usually we talk about style, about project, but if there is no factory working at its best, working on the 3 M's, so means, materials, and man work, so you don't have everything, but the quality was not yet to the point of bringing the 155 to an upper segment. But we had another level of competitors, and this meant having another future for the Pomigliano plant. So we worked a lot on the 33. I came here with the 33, actually 1 and 3V, which means fast. Oh, you know everything. And it's as if it were new. there's plastic inside. But what's amazing is that I saw it was produced in May 1990. Well, in May 1990, I was there for the production of the 33. So I said, wow, if there's an issue, it's my responsibility. But this car had no problems. And I must say that we worked hard, especially on the paint, because we were late. And it was evident. They didn't believe that in Pomigliano we could get to the quality of the D level. So I remember that we were spending day and night with engineer Leggero, who's one of the responsible people of the painting, to try to increase the level, because apart from technology and material, it was the man who still had a lot of impact. So working on the pride that is still present in Pomigliano, if you find it, we went to the good level. But in Fiat we were ready. They were ready to send out the bodyworks painted in Chivasso, fearing that in Pomigliano and Napoli we were not able to get the desired quality for that type of car. So Pomigliano had its revenge. So it proved that you could bet on Naples despite all the problems, and that they have a future. And this is maybe the best thing that we left. Then one day the boss came to bring 6.5 billion to redo the painting department. So because from a person from Naples, sending someone from the north to do what you cannot do is very bad. But 156 was born thanks to the 33, who did a leap of quality in the 1990-92, so as to be able to say, well, the 155, which was being born, benefited from everything with it. So Fiat was convinced to get along with Walter de Silva and to produce that very successful car. The Nuvola color was not produced in Pomigliano because they were not able to do that, and it was Arese which produced it, and then the products were changed and Pomigliano could produce that color. But the 33 was also a testament of the life of a group of people, of a city, of a plant that also risks to be shut down. And the second series of the 33, as a matter of fact, is a new car. The type code changes, which is quite rare for the Alfa Romeo, but in reality, well, at least if we look at what is present in the archives of the style, the first drafts, the first drawings, and the first models of the 33907 were ready at the next day after a presentation. So at the end of 84, the 907 is present with final lines, even though in the meanwhile different versions had been studied. There was the 3 volumes idea, which was then abandoned, with a repositioning of the car, and they also thought of remodeling, as always, the front and the back with a sprint element. Some of you did it. I've seen outside the front part of a sprint on a 33. So it was something that others did before. So, Mr. Felisa, you were head of the project of the 107? Yes, it was when we decided to do this important thing. It was not a restyling, but it was basically a completely new car with a series of important results. And I also think that with the birth of the Sportwagon, it was another important hit for the image and the success of the 33. I think it's one of the most important successes of Alfa Romeo. It's what you said, the Permanente was an incredible car. It was exceptional. We tested it on the Amalfi Coast, 1700, but the transmission came from Ottomelara, the country where this man is from. So sometimes we had a few problems because doing something like that, so advanced, was not easy. We had also to better manage the plants. So that's also what we did in Naples. Well, at the time, I think that was the most innovative solution, with technologies that were not distributed everywhere and that were particularly good for a light car as a 33. So everything was developed consistently. Yes, it was fantastic. And also, the metal sheets were changed from one series to another, which usually is very difficult to have inside the same car. Usually, you change the name. Yes, that's why we went down south with that aim. First, to work on the molds and printing, because sometimes they measured, the men were assessed according to the pieces produced in an hour, not the quality of the pieces produced. But it was done in order to optimize the system. But that's made when you have series, not when you have qualities. So we brought the culture of Arese. It was the only one in Italy who did this printing, these metal sheets, without a single defect. Also in zinc coating galvanized metal sheets. And that's not easy, because when you have to paint them and there are flaws, the machine is not good. So we invested a lot on the galvanized metal sheets, partly learning, as Mr. Felisa said, from the Arna, and partly learning from the 166. It was not even useful to put galvanized metal sheets. Mercedes always said we don't need them, but we did a lot of bad things before, so we wanted to implement it as a guarantee in the non-corrosive process of the car. It was the last step to improve the quality from the point of view of corrosion, because galvanized metal sheets was another important step to solve the problem of corrosion. While talking again about the market and the car, one of the characteristics of the range is that it diversified a lot, creating problems to those who had to produce it, because the updates, the series, the differentiation among them are important sometimes, but especially by launching this era of the special series that up to that time were just limited to the Alfa Sud and some Spring Balocco, Alfa Sud Valentino, originating to special series. But up to that moment, the special series was seen as the one for the importer in other countries. So offering other versions that were not even diffused in Italy or in Arese. They were not even agreed with the headquarters, but this became a way to sell the cars not only at the end of the range, but also during the life of the product. Leonardo, can you tell us something about this? Well, yes. Let's say that this was an evolution also in the consideration that Alfa Romeo had towards a special series, because special series around mid-70s started to be successful. But if you think about the official ones decided in Arese, what were not present here, they were in United States, Spider Veloce from GT Lauda, Alfetta GTW by Alfetti, and also the Alfa Sud from the German part, Corsa 7, Corsa 8, while in Italy, Alfa Romeo, which was a mass market, but from the upper scale, was skeptical. Especially, we start with the Valentino Junior with Alfa Sud at the beginning of the 80s. With the 33, the start was the same, because the first special series, which was really decided in Alfa Romeo, was the Silver in 1987. But abroad, there were already other experiences based on a car which was recently produced. Why do you do special series? Well, it's marketing levers that you can do in two situations generally. Either when you have a drop of the sales which are unexpected, when the car is still being produced, or when you know that it's coming to the end because there's either an important restyling or it's phasing out. So it's also a way to free some space in the stock. So in the 33, but in the book that you talk about, there's two chapters of the special series. There, the first series is 907. On the 907, there are almost all special series decided in Alfa Romeo, more or less. Then, if you get to, okay, the evolution, I don't want to do them, I want to have them done abroad, we arrive to further versions done to finish the stocks. So the first special series on this base, which is a 1500 with a green 4 cloverleaf, is the German Monte Carlo. And as you said, and Pasquale can confirm, the German, well, the foreign dealers, the foreign branches had a certain autonomy, also because the French German is known by the French brand better than the Arese headquarters. So there was a need to finalize with materials found in that nation, because the Monte Carlo has a Zender kit, 15 Zender or Ronald, I don't remember, rims. So from a historical point of view, it's challenging and fun, but it's hard because the press releases, as you can see there, we have the Monte Carlo, the Prima Veloce, then there's a special series which is a special because it has a fender, which we will see on another car, but that leaflet is done in Germany. And you probably don't have this leaflet in your archives. So it's difficult to understand this because you have to understand the situation of the market. So we said 87 silver, because once again, in France and Germany, they had more problems than us with the 33 selling it, because it's a peculiar car, as all the Alfa Romeo. But then, in the past, the markets were more nationalistic when buying this. So it was a car being an Alfa Romeo car, but being not a local car, was more difficult to be sold. In 87, Alfa Romeo had another problem to sell another version, less powerful one than the 1300S. The 79 horsepower was not very sold, the convertible roofs were not very typical of Alfa Romeo. Then a silver arrived, another silver the next year, and then in the 89, well, we see a red, a 1500, and then so the Berlina and the Giardinetta had two different types of customers. The Italia 90 is the only one which was produced on a single series in a sedan and station wagon, and then this special series becomes a plurality. The same blue line, which is the last one of 89, is different according to the market. It is destined to. There is the convertible roof or not, different colors, etc. So you see that we would have sold even more cars if it were realized before, because our customers are different. But that would become a special series in 1994. So there was an evolution. But of course, the more you go to the end of the series, the more you have market levers to sell the product. While a private initiative enlivens the 33 Cabrio, and we have the only one model here which is privately owned, so a series of companies collaborated and officially or less officially gave life to this prototype. So was it ever considered to produce it? Well, if you don't know it, I don't know, I would say no comment. I don't know, I have never seen it. It's the first time that I see it, and I was amazed. And I said, well, it's interesting. I don't know whether it is homologated or not. It has a license plate. Well, in reality, Alfa Romeo also issued a press release on the car, but then everything disappears. But unfortunately, Umberto Agnelli was dead already, and that was bad because he strongly believed in the development of somewhere. We did the GT in Pomigliano, but Pomigliano reached a record of 1,050 cars per day, which is an unbeaten record for Pomigliano. We also produced the GTC, which is in the Bertone collection, because we wanted to do the GTC and the GTA. But unfortunately, Umberto Agnelli died, and our life of Alfa enthusiasts was very short. It went on with the 159 for 2-3 years. Stelvio was born, the Kamal was born, and every time I see it, I get pissed off because we had to go out with that car December 2005, and we still talk about Alfa Romeo SUVs today, just to tell you some of the disasters we did. So, but that's life, and you take it or leave it. But not the 33. The 33 was a huge success. Yes, it was a huge success. And let's say it's a pleasure to see that today we have a full room, and the track is full of the 33, and what looked to be a Cinderella now has its moment of celebrity. Yes, it is true. I didn't expect to see so many. But I thank you for this first part of the storytelling. I'm sure that there are questions, but apart from thanking you, and I know that it was not easy to have all of you today on stage, but I thank my colleague because he proved to be a son of the Alfa. But I appreciated a lot your presence as well as our audience. I'm always happy about the participation. I thank all of you. I know that many of you got up very early or arrived yesterday from Basilicata, Sicily, and so congratulations. And then I would like to thank Alfa Roma, who adopted this backstage and was responsible for gathering all these cars. What you are seeing now is the result of our efforts. So the flash mob has now become a habit. So I also thank my colleagues Marco and Roberto, who then physically draw the lines, but they are very skilled now. And if you have questions, this is this is a great opportunity. I'm Giuliano Fabrini, one of the founders of Alfa Sud Club Italia. So talking about the difference between Alfa Sud and 33, there is an important variation, we think. So the back bridge, the rear bridge of Alfa Sud has disc brakes and suspensions which more advanced compared to the 33. Why was this choice done of the reducing the level of the back bridge of the 33, while the front part, while removing the brakes from the inside, bringing them to the outside, solved the problem of overheating of the discs, which was one of the problems of the Alfa Sud. Thanks. Well, the fundamental ideas was doing something lighter, and from the point of view of performances, if you can have a great setup of the car, the performances are very good. So I've said the technological solution was then used for other cars because it was good. It's a bit difficult to put in place, but it's a very light solution. Have you ever thought of using the W6 on the 33? No. I would say it's incompatible in terms of sizes, and then maybe it depends. The V6 had performances and power that are not compatible with the 33, with the structure of the 33. Maybe on the Sprint with the 6 cylinders, but it becomes impossible to drive. Actually, the prototype was done in 2 different versions. One which has a more sports aspect, so it's a Sprint with a rear engine. The second one, which is all red and is visible in the collection, is a car where the engine is a 2500, which was more for an Alfa 90 and then transferred to the rear, but the car was reinforced with the double amortizers, suspensions, supports. So the idea was like a rally sports car, which was very common in those years, and then also the prototype was not developed anymore. But Kitty never liked rallies, said it's bullshit, rallies are bullshit, so we lost a great occasion with the GT because we could have beaten the Stratos with that V8 engine, but Kitty didn't like that. He said, what's this? He liked the racetrack, not the rallies, but the car are born with a certain balance. If you change it, it's no longer the 33, it's something different. Why no one thought of selling a turbo box, which was planned, of course, as if I'm not wrong. Well, honestly, at the time, the turbo were not considered as today. The development was different. I don't think that would have been an added value on the 33. The engine of the 33 is one of the best engines that Alfa Romeo produced. I don't know that making it turbo would make sense. I never heard about it, but it was not in fashion. There were no turbos. They were not as developed as today. No one ever talked about the turbo. They were starting to be present. They were very prudent. Francesco Bottari. So, talking about engines, someone ever thought about having a Boxer 2000 produced? What, you mean flat? The Alpha Sud solution, well, I think that there are not many 8 cylinders with a flat configuration. No, but brought to 2000, it becomes another engine. Well, it becomes another engine. The engine of the 33 was born 1,300, 1,200. So it becomes completely another engine. Well, Domenico Chirico, in his declarations, says that he worked on a 2 liters version, but it was another engine. Maybe this required investments that could not be considered, as the Boxer diesel. The first Boxer diesel of the history was made by Piccone in Alfa Romeo, and is one of the objects that can be seen hidden, and the Subaru started producing it a few years ago with the Boxer diesel engine, but the first one was done by Piccone in Alfa Romeo, but it was never produced. While the 8-cylinder Boxer loses a part of the of its use because it's created to have other powers. With 8 cylinders, I would find other solutions. Yes, I agree, but in that case, it was not foreseeable. But bringing it to 2000 could not be sellable. Then you have to redesign everything. Giorgio Bellocchi, today everybody talks about hybrid cars. 33 1500 Giardinetta with hybrid engine was conceived, but was it then taken to the next stage? No, I know nothing about it. So that's a proof that you don't follow our backstages, because we devoted an entire backstage to hybrid cars. No, but we didn't know, we were not informed. Actually, it's a project that was part of those projects financed by the National Research Center, which financed Alfa Romeo to find solutions bringing benefit to the mobility world. So green solutions. Alfa Romeo worked on CEM, on the taxis of Milan, and for many versions, in hybrid engine that was then mounted on a Boxer, which was very easy. So you just put the Ansaldo engine with a belt, which is visible in the collection, but this was presented on a 33 Giardinetta when the project had already been abandoned, just to prove what had been done in a research that was not limited to the 33. Giuseppe Galloro, Alfa Romeo, and the cars of the army or the state police. The 33 was adopted by the police. Was it a different car, or was it the normal car that was sold? Well, it depends. I don't recall. It was not in Pomigliano the period. Probably the engine was modified. Well, the Alfetta was reinforced and it had more power. For police and carabinieri, it was Auto Delta which prepared the engines, which are more powerful. But I don't recall about the 33, well, at least not in the period I was there. So the car was the same that was sold to the general public. There were some differences in some versions that you could not have. If you have the 88 version, a police car, 1500, I've seen that there's a 33 from the police, and the inside is the same as the 1300. So it's not the interior of the Quadrifoglio Verde matching the mechanics. So you remember the faux leather inside, but these were the modifications, not modifications. Well, you did Giulia 1750 for the finance police, but the mechanics was standardized as it is standardized now. I heard many nice words, but do you think that the judgment of the test drivers who collaborated were taken into account or not? What, especially for the cars of Alfa Romeo like the 33, what the test pilot did is fundamental. So the dynamics of the car were not done through a calculator, so the fundamental element was the human element, the test pilot. So it was fundamental in the development. Yes. So since I heard that no one said about the test pilots, so we were forgotten. No, we have the 7 magnificent test pilots. In our offices, we have the 7 great test pilots of Alfa Romeo. Guido is one of them. Well, but it was a category of incredible people. Guido, when he was no longer a pilot but was a consultant, went to Balocco. We were developing the Tema, the big one, the Thesis, the huge, it's like a ship, but you still see a lot of them around. We were developing that one with Fugazza, and Fugazza was the head of the project. And we said, Guido, please, can you drive it? And he came there for a short test. Guido was incredible. So he went on the car. He was skeptical. He was talking in the Milanese vernacular dialect. He did 2 loops. He went out. He made a list of problems to Fugazza. Fugazza remained shocked because these were all problems that after months of study, they still realized they had. Guido understood it immediately in a test drive. So I will always remember this. Guido is a great man. So apart from the development, the test pilots are important also in the previous part, when the first prototype is produced. Now there are simulations that allow you to have assessments, but in the past it was not the case. So the feeling was the feeling of the car given by the test pilot. It was difficult to feel the car on a drawing, because sometimes we also did sort of a review. Each one expressed their own opinions, and then you had a final review. So since he talked about the Magnificent 7, I want to say something without being polemic. There were test pilots and crash pilots, demolishing pilots. So out of those 7, 2 or 3 were more demolishing pilots than test pilots. As Nanni Galli demolished the cars. Orsali respected them because the car had to be brought to its limit, but not breaking it. Otherwise, it's easy, and the shame is always on someone else, on the material, on the tires. So they were never responsible. Yeah, but the real test pilots are not those who go fast, but those who in normal conditions can understand the weak points and the strong points of the car. And that the pilots are another thing, but the very good test pilots can have a good judgment of the car, driving it as we drive it every day, because no one drives a car at 300 kilometers per hour. Andrea? So we would stay here till midnight, since there are great names today. So I take advantage of this. It's for the 4 of you. Mr. Oliveri talked about the diesel engine before. Since on the internet, the opinion is that the diesel Boxer on the 33 was not done due to commercial agreements with the VM, because the 33 then was equipped with the 3 cylinders, which was not so successful. It was not up to the car produced by Alfa Romeo, the 33. I wanted to know from you how exactly that adventure went of putting that diesel engine, why it was not in the end done in the turbo diesel version. I don't know. Were you working on it? Well, I thought that diesel and fuel either are conceived on the same platform from the beginning, or it's impossible. The Boxer was born as a fuel engine. Transforming it into diesel would have meant redoing it completely. So the best diesel engines are the ones that were conceived from the start as diesel engines. Yeah, and then it's still the same engine which was not developed. I don't know, Andrea. And then there are also strategic factors of companies participating, etc. So that's also industrial, political impact. But of course, what the engineer is saying is true. Maybe we could have had to invest more and there would have been no return. It may be a suggestion for a backstage of 2024. And then the VM was from the IRI group, which also became Alfa Romeo. So from the point of view of the 33, the prototype, I mean, and our 33, the sedan or the sport wagon, maybe the engine can be the thing that is close to me, because it's a 4 cylinders, it's a Boxer, so it's always a Boxster. So maybe the strong connection with the 33 might be the fact that there's an engine, even though having different cylinders, but it's a similar engine. Of course, those who designed the 4 cylinders from Alfa Su of 33 had a high competence on engines. It probably was derived from another application. Are there any other questions? Well. Let's say we satisfied our audience. Thank you. Until next time.